So I think we're just coming up on 12 now. I'll maybe give it 15 seconds or so just to allow people to join if there's a couple of people still coming in. Okay, I think probably good to go at this stage. So firstly, everyone, you're really welcome to our webinar. We'll be hosting one of these every 6 months when we do our latest hiring trends update. So before I ask Richard to introduce himself and me to introduce myself, I'll just quickly ask that let's try and make this as interactive as possible. It'll be really good to hear your experiences, write in the chat. I'll be asking questions and asking for little bits of feedback as we go through it. So it'd be really good to get the participation levels up so we can get your feedback as we're going through it. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A box. We'll get to it as either live or we'll come back to it at the end where we've got some time for Q&A. So as I said, it is our hiring trends update. So we are going to run these, like I said, every 6 months to get a good pulse check of how the job market is shifting and changing. So at this stage, I'll hand over to Richard to introduce himself before I come back to introduce myself properly.
Good afternoon, folks. I'm Richard Ramsey. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Professor of Practice in Economics and Policy at Queen's Business School here in Belfast. And previously, I was Chief Economist for Ulster Bank.
Great, thanks, Richard. And I'm Chris Pay. I'm the country director for the Stepstone Group in Ireland. So that includes NIJobs. So I'm really happy to be here today speaking to you all. We'll have a quick look at the agenda. So Richard will really take us through the market shifts. Between the two of us, we'll have a look at some of the skills shortages, talking about candidate behaviour. What's the strategy and outlook like for 2026? And then we'll have some time at the end for a Q&A and a discussion. So I'm going to hand over to Richard shortly. But before I do, I'd love to know in one word, please in the chat, how you would describe how hiring has been in 2025. Okay, it's Justin, challenging. Frustrating, challenging and frustrating, slow. Yeah, it's been a difficult year, uncertain. Yeah, so I think what we've seen is, the first comment probably hit it on the head. It's been challenging, but there are some opportunities out there as well. So I think at this stage, it's really good to get the view of an economist and bring Richard in to take over.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And so what I want to do, I'll first of all just focus on some of the key hiring kind of trends, and then I'll go into some of the other economic data and trends, and then drill into the labour market in more detail. And I suppose if we think of, we're looking at this chart in terms of hiring levels. So this is then looking at, this is from Office of National Statistics, looking at September 2025. You can see there was just under 12,000 vacancies advertised. And there is a sense that we're seeing a bit of a cooling down. You see the previous years, like 2023, in the navy line. But if we even take some of these figures relative to pre-pandemic levels, they would be down slightly, and they're also down well below where in 2022, when there was the surge in hiring after the pandemic, after there was this slump in recruiting activity. So if we move on to then just look at some of the economic data sort of behind that, and if we looking at private sector activity, and these charts here are from the it's the Ulster Bank Private Sector Growth Tracker. And you can see the 50 mark, the horizontal line chart on the left is looking at business activity or sales or output. And this is looking at month on month changes in activity. The 50 line is no change. Anything below that line is contraction. The lower the number, the faster the rate of decline. Conversely, anything above that line is expansion or growth. And what you can see is for 10 of the last 11 months up until October, we have seen that private sector firms in Northern Ireland have been reporting falling levels of business activity. And this survey covers manufacturing, construction services, and retail. But while that may be the case on business activity, and it's also a similar picture for new orders, which is incoming work, if we look at the chart on the right, looking at specifically at employment, we can see that firms are still hiring in October, albeit it's at a modest rate. And indeed, if you look at this survey as undertaken for all 12 UK regions, it's actually London, the Northeast, and Northern Ireland are the only regions which are actually recording month-on-month increases in their staffing levels during the month of October. That's some of the survey data which presents, particularly in output, presents a negative picture. If we move on to the next slide, we will then look at the official statistics, which some of them are, what it's showing is quite surprising in a good way that it's positive. So the Northern Ireland Composite Economic Index, or NICE as it's kind of known, this is the nearest thing that we have to quarterly GDP figures. And the latest figures are for the 3 months to June, the second quarter. We saw a big, strong surge in activity in terms, and this is output. And you can see that that was 2%, which if you think of that in terms of economic growth, if you were getting that annualized up for 4 quarters, that would be 8% growth per year, which would be absolutely fantastic rate of growth. But to me, and to a lot of other economists, it just seems a bit too strong, and some people are disagreeing, and that's not what they're experiencing it as being as buoyant as that. The chart on the right then just looks at levels of output, and you can see that how we had the slump in output, the record fall, decline following the pandemic, but we've seen since about the second quarter of 2022, we recovered the lost output there, and private sector output has been continuing to rise since then. So that's encouraging picture. If we move on to the next slide, this is in the table on the left is then just looking at the Northern Ireland performance relative to some of the other areas, and you can see how strong the quarter-on-quarter growth is 2% for Northern Ireland versus just 0.3% for the UK. To me, that feels too strong. I do think Northern Ireland is outperforming, but not to that degree. And you can see then relative to Ireland, the one that I would flag is the one at the bottom, the Ireland MDD, which is modified domestic demand, because comparing with Irish GDP or GNP is notoriously difficult because of all the kind of impact of the Googles, Facebook, Meta of this world, which then kind of distort the figures. But you can see that what the comparable growth rate is there. Year-on-year change, 3.5 for Northern Ireland, 4.3 for the Republic. And since the pre-pandemic, you can see that Northern Ireland's growth has outperformed the UK, Scotland, obviously not Ireland, but the thing is that we are experiencing what could be described as Southern comfort, which is the economic tailwinds in terms of trade, tourism, investment, which is coming from the south to the north. And that's happening in a variety of ways. And we can see the chart on the right in terms of retail sales, really, really strong for Northern Ireland compared to the likes of GB. And one of the factors here is clearly shoppers from the south. And you may have seen in the Financial Times an article by Jude Webber recently, which was highlighting that there has been a surge in business of customers coming from the south to the north to pharmacies. where the pharmacy business is booming because of the Mounjaro fat loss drug, which in the south there's a 23% VAT rate for injectables. It's not applied in the north, and there's big price differentials. So we've been having people from all corners of Ireland coming to Northern Ireland for that. But clearly, it's not just in terms of retail. If we think of in terms of a lot of services, in terms of tourism, there's been double digit growth in the number of visitors coming from south to north year to date. And then also, if you even think of things like medical services, there's everything from, if you go around any of the private hospitals, Kingsbridge, Ulster Independent Clinic, you only have to walk around and see the Southern registered cars there. People are also then coming for whether it's corrective eye surgery or whether it's dental care or other medical treatments. So there's a lot of demand is coming there, and that is helping to boost the Northern Ireland economy. If we move on to then looking at the labour market in particular, we can see that we've got the employee jobs on the left-hand side. And if you notice that during the Great Recession, after the crash and the property crash in Northern Ireland, it took several years to get back to the level of employment that we had before that, the pre-peak levels. Whereas if you look at after the COVID-19 recession, there was then we quickly have recovered, and we've then continued to rise, and we've seen that employee levels are, as of the second quarter, at a record high of just under 843,000. Also, the labour market does look healthy whenever we look at the unemployment rate as well. So there was figures just out earlier in the week, which were then showing that Northern Ireland's unemployment rate is 2.4%, which compares to 5% for the UK. And if we think before the pandemic, that's the same level. Northern Ireland was 2.4 just before the pandemic struck, whereas the UK was 3.7 and it's gone up to 5%. But while this does look good, and it's like ministers, government ministers will always highlight how strong our unemployment figures are in terms of them being so low and a positive indicator, the lowest unemployment rate of the 12 UK regions. Remember, this doesn't include economically inactive. Those are those people who are neither in work or looking for work. And while Northern Ireland has the lowest unemployment rate, we have the highest economically inactive rate. So that is, and one of the main reasons for that is long-term sickness. And if we think in the 3 months to September, there was 119,000 individuals were classed as long-term sick, and so were therefore neither looking for work or in work. And that represents 1 in 10 of the working age population. So when we think of the tight labour market, difficult in terms of skills shortages and shortage of labour, it clearly doesn't help that straight away you've got 1 in 10 people of the working age population aren't even able to be tapped into in that regard. Also, some of the features that we're seeing in the rise of economic inactivity is it's the younger generation, particularly the kind of if we look at the 16 to 24 year age group as well, there is a category called NEETs, which are not in employment, education or training. And that has been continuing to rise. And the Northern Ireland Skills Council estimates that there's going to be 2,000 more NEETs. So that's age 16 to 24, not in education, employment or training. That's going to increase by 2,000 per year over the next few years. Again, ideally, you would want them coming into the workforce and not opting out. So if we just move on then, looking at some of the specific sectors and what has been happening in this kind of shifts, this is looking at the HMRC payrolls data, and this is looking at the change in total payrolls from just before the pandemic, February 2020 to October. And you can see the kind of winners and losers, but there's been strong growth across a variety of sectors. But top of the pile is education, almost 17,000, health and social work, etc. And you've seen some sectors have actually reduced their headcount. Other service activities, that would be some of the kind of personal services And then you've got admin and support services. And I suppose when you think of like technology is then coming in and replacing some of those jobs. But what I suppose one of the reasons why, if you think of education, why is education so strong? Actually, there's behind that sort of growth, if you look at underneath that kind of 17,000 number, we've seen a surge in the increase of non-teaching staff in our schools, colleges, and universities. And the main reason for that has been the rise of special educational needs, and people are having to pour into that discipline. And I suppose I use the word pour. You've got over the last 5 years, you've seen a 20% increase in headcount in that kind of non-teaching activities, and that's like over 12,000 jobs. Clearly, that's putting on big pressure for the Stormont and the education budget. If we look at the chart on the right, this is looking at payrolls, then just looking at year on year from October 2024, which was when the famous budget that Rachel Reeves delivered. And what is interesting to see, and we're seeing some of the sectors that kind of losing headcount, likes of accommodation, food and services. That hospitality sector has received a hospitality pass in terms of the national living wage rises, 6.7% over the last year. And if you think since 2019, national living wage has risen by cumulatively by almost 50%. And for 16 to 18-year-olds, it's almost doubled. And also in terms of the employer national insurance contributions, which hits the lower wage occupations more. We're also seeing information communication, the kind of IT, that's falling off. One of the reasons for that is the rise of AI means that coding, we no longer need coders to the same degree because AI can do that for you. Similarly, in terms of some of the professional scientific, that includes consultancy services, amongst other things. If we move on then to looking at wages, it's been a bumper year for wage growth, and the chart on the left is looking at the average, the median earnings of a full-time employer. And you can see the year-on-year growth. This is up to April of this year, so the financial year, 8.1% in the latest year. That's a record year, and indeed the last 3 years have been the kind of strongest years for wage growth in the last 20 years. And so this is nominal wage growth. And remember, things like, as I say, the national living wage is coming into play here. But if we actually look at what's happening with real earnings, so adjusting for inflation, you can see that again, 3.9%, very, very strong year for growth. But if you look at what has been happening, what was the pre-pandemic average, it was only 0.8%, because what we've had is this period of inflation. Indeed, over the last 4 years, we've had strong inflation, particularly food inflation, up 37% over the last 4 years, which is more than in the previous 14 years. And so we are seeing a recovery in real wages, but it's important to look at what's been happening, and it's not growth in terms of wages you've got to look at what's been happening with wage levels, because we all know about what's been happening over the last decade or so. And if we move on to the slide, which is looking at private and public sector earnings, private on the left, public on the right. So this is looking at the annual wages when you adjust for inflation, what has been happening. And you can see that if you go back to 2008, the median private sector wage was 32,100. We then went through the whole global financial crisis, the austerity, where we saw wages weren't rising in real terms below the rate of inflation. And it was only then 2019 that private sector wages recovered to their pre-global financial crash levels. Then we were hit by the pandemic, and you can see then the whole surge in inflation saw real wages fall back. And 2025, we're back up. Yes, that's a record high. But in 20 years, you've only seen a £2,500 rise in the median private sector wage. If you look at the public sector on the right, it has been significantly worse, where you can actually see that it's only been in the last year where we've seen a surge in growth, 10% in the full-time public sector earnings in the last year. That's due to it being a kind of multi-year pay deal over maybe like 3 years. And yes, it's back up to the kind of 43,000 level, but that's rebounding off last year, which is a 24-year low, and that's still, if you cast your eye back to like 2004 levels, it's comparable with that. So one of the problems has been the whole legacy of wage stagnation, which has gone on for the last 15 years or so, and that is why workers are, so keen on salary increases, the cost of living squeeze. That is making them potentially more itchy and wanting to sort of move, because they have to, because what we've seen has been unprecedented in terms of the hit to wage growth. You only have to look at what happened between 1999 and 2005. Saw the huge growth in real earnings in terms of private sector and public sector. That hasn't happened, and we've seen the likes of strike action and all the kind of problems that follow after that. So if we then just move on to then just kind of summing up in terms of what's happening, labour markets, we're seeing kind of hiring trends are kind of cooling. There's a bit of uncertainty. Unemployment is still low, but it's probably set to rise into the threes. A lot of uncertainty around, not least with Rachel Reeves, where we've got just 13 sleeps left to hear what she's going to do, and whether there's going to be a job tax, a second job tax in the shape of what she does to salary sacrifice schemes and all of those, which will make it more difficult for recruiters and employers and more costly to retain and attract staff. But what we're seeing is, in terms of salary and flexibility, seems to be what's motivating employees, where 56% of workers would move for a higher pay, and they're also 38% are favor flexibility. So they're almost wanting they're kind of cake and eat it, where we're saying salary, flexibility, and also hybrid working. The kind of workers, they really want it all. And then in terms of what we're seeing is longer hiring cycles as well, where firms are then finding it's taking longer to like sift through more candidates in the whole recruitment process. But I'll hand you back over to Chris.
Thanks a million, Richard. Really interesting stuff there, particularly around the wage stagnation. I think it's crazy really to see that chart going back so long and so little movement from one decade almost to the next. But I'm going to go back to everyone on the call, and it'll be interesting to see what's the number one hiring challenge that you think employers cited when we surveyed them. So this is the poll. It'll have popped up now for you all to answer. So good to see what you think it might be. And then I'll give you the answer we got. Right, so lack of qualified candidates at the moment is winning. Seems to be, well, it's not going to be caught at this stage. It's like watching a horse race live here. Okay. So 25 answers, 26 answers where it's clear that lack of qualified candidates is going to be the answer. So 74% of you have just said that it's lack of qualified candidates, and it will be no surprise to anyone on this call that 72% of recruiters, when we asked them, gave the same answer. So I suppose, given the audience, it makes complete sense, and I'm glad that it's within 2%. So it really shows the robustness of the survey, I think. So moving on, I'll speak in a little while about skills and how they're going to be the currency of 2026. But before I go into that, just have a look at what are the key positions that are driving hiring momentum. So we've our own in-house tool which crawls and scrapes online job boards, websites, just to make sure that we're seeing exactly what's happening in the marketplace. So we can see that retail positions make sense when you saw one of Richard's graphs and the red line way ahead of the rest of the UK. So we're seeing that there's a huge amount of positions in retail, logistics, and social care. So again, going back to some of Richard's slides, this all makes sense. And looking forward then, the top 10 most in demand roles. Well, of course, we're going to see retail assistants in there. We're going to see caregivers, sales advisors, production operators. So again, following that path of what we've just seen. But going back to the skills point I made. So 72% of recruiters are saying they're struggling to hire candidates with the right skill set. And what's interesting is I think that skill set has really shifted over time. So over the next year, 57%, so 6 out of 10 more or less are saying it's really important that we prioritize skills-based hiring. And again, I'll go into what that actually means in a little bit. But before I do, what are those skills that employers like yourselves are telling us they're finding difficult to source? So technical skills is pretty much always at the top because, of course, if you're an engineer, you need an engineering degree. If you're a lawyer, you need to be qualified, or an accountant. So it's always going to be at the top. I think the one that's really interesting for me is soft skills. And it's the one to watch over the next little while, particularly as we in 6 months' time do this again. What's more interesting for me as well is it was also very high in the survey we did for the Republic of Ireland, but it wasn't as high as 39%. So what are the soft skills? Well, employers are looking for, emotional intelligence, teamwork, adaptability, communication skills. And we shouldn't forget that there are a cohort of candidates, and this is in no way having a go at them, but there's a cohort of candidates coming into the marketplace who did their schooling, finished their schooling online, or their college education online, or started their first role fully remotely. And I think it's really difficult to have learned those emotional intelligence, the adaptability, communication when you're staring at a screen for 8 hours a day, when you're reading body language from tiles on a screen, not sitting in a room with people. So those soft skills are missing to a degree, and it's something that is being called out more and more. So definitely one to watch as we go through the next 6-month cycle. So like I said, 72% are struggling to find them. But how do we go from a skills shortage to a skills advantage? So 57% of NI employers are already assessing candidates on specific skills, but we need to widen that talent. And what do I mean by that? I think we need to go from capabilities, from credentials to capabilities. So at the moment, I think if I'm very honest, we've become across maybe Europe a little bit snooty about education and looking at everything, and everybody needs a degree and an obsession with third level. And if I give a really good example, if I go on to NIJobs.com today, I will likely see sales roles, and I will likely see one of the requirements being a third level degree for something that really doesn't need a third level degree. So I'll use myself as an example. When I started in NIJobs in 2007, and I finished in UCD in Dublin on the bank holiday Friday in June, and I was in Irish Jobs on a Tuesday. And I'd studied politics and economics, Bachelor of Arts. So don't worry, Richard, your job is safe. But the reality is my degree had absolutely nothing to do, or gave me no help whatsoever when it came to understanding how the workplace was going to work. It didn't help me when I was getting on the phone trying to pitch and sell the Irish Jobs product, or for those coming into NI Jobs trying to do the same. How I learned was the people around me. And when I look around at that time, I think there was about 25 people on the Irish Job sales team at the time. And I'd say about 5 of us had completed a third level education. And in this time of applicant tracking systems, it's very easy to knock out candidates who have capabilities because they don't have the credentials. So I think it's a really good example of a way that we can lose really good candidates and shift if we're not shifting to skills over that credential. Then internally, of course, we need to prioritize training. I love the phrase "move up, not out." Talking to people in our business and seeing where do they want to go. For example, I've two guys on the moment on our customer service team. Both have said they actually want to move into sales roles. They've zero experience. So normally we wouldn't hire anyone with no experience into a sales role. But what we'll do is we will look at a training program. How can we get them some sort of exposure to it and train them? And it does now mean going back to that 6 weeks hiring cycle that Richard mentioned. I now know when they move into a sales role, hopefully I'll be able to help them with that, that I will have the time to bring someone else in. So I'm shortening that hiring cycle for myself. So I think that that's really important as well as we go into 2026. But I'll come back to you guys again, another poll. And I'm going to ask, what do you think candidates want the most from their prospective employers in 2026? Or was that chat? I think it's a chat one, actually. So yeah, just in the chat, you can type in 1 or 2 words. What do you think candidates are looking for as we move into 2026? Yeah, work-life balance, flexibility, salary, kind of exactly what we expected to see. And as Richard said, 50% of candidates are planning to change their jobs in 2026, and 56% of them are telling us their main driver is salary. Again, what I find interesting here is if we were to look at this 3 years ago, work-life balance and salary would be side by side. In fact, it would have been tipping in the favor a lot of the time of work-life balance. It was more about how much are you going to allow me work from home as opposed to how much are you going to pay me. And that's definitely materially shifted. And Richard already gave you the answer why. The reality is we've had high periods of inflation, particularly in that grocery, retail. You're looking at gas, electricity, all those prices have gone way up over the last little while. So at the start of 2023, if you were given a salary increase during that year, the likelihood at the end of 2023 is you probably had a little bit less in your pocket. It's probably continued into 2024 and 2025. And when you compound that over 3 years, of course, people are now starting to feel that squeeze. And what better way to go about increasing your salary than by going into a negotiation with a new employer and trying to get a higher salary that way. But it doesn't mean that it's going to get any easier for employers because you still have 38% valuing that work-life balance, which in reality, most of the time now means hybrid work, remote work. So it's a really tough market for employers when you're trying to attract talent because you need to be benchmarking your salaries to make sure you're in the right place, but you also need to make sure that you're providing flexibility or you won't be attractive. So this time it is a poll, so I'll get it right this time. So I'm going to ask when employees feel unsatisfied in their role, what's the top reason given? So what do you think it is? Not enough pay, lack of training and development. Okay. Oh, this is close. It's a 2-horse race really at the moment. I don't even like horse racing. I don't know why I've mentioned it twice. Okay, not enough pay, slightly in the lead. But we're seeing lack of training and development. Okay, so not enough pay is the answer you've given, which is interesting because as the employers, you were bang on the money, but actually, I've kind of set you up to fail on this one though, because it was actually lack of training and development. So I've spoken about not enough pay, but the reality is, I'm going to steal a line from Jen who's on this call. Again, I stole it the last time. Salary is what attracts. Training and development is what keeps them there. So again, a really difficult job for employers because your employees want training and development, but they will leave for a higher salary as well. So you need to make sure you're really doing both, that you are training, that you're getting people to use their skills as much as they can, you're giving them the opportunity to move up and to upskill, because otherwise they will leave. But you also need to be benchmarking salaries and providing that flexibility. So it's no doubt it's a really, really difficult market for employers when like Richard said, unemployment at such a low rate, there is a huge war for talent. Now looking into 2026, I think going back to that focus on skills fit, it's really important that we are allowing recruiters spend time on hiring qualified candidates and finding those soft skills. And one of the problems we have right now is 10 and a half hours are spent on manual tasks per week by recruiters. So if you put that in context, it's between a quarter and a third of their working week is spent just doing something manual that surely we can adapt to AI. So I think AI is offering us, and you can't do a webinar nowadays without speaking about AI, but I do think it is offering us an opportunity to become more efficient. And I think a lot of people are talking about, will there be loads of job losses because of AI? And it's not how I see it. I think jobs will shift and change. I think we will see jobs becoming more efficient. And recruiter is one of the ones that I can concentrate on. But if we look here, just under half of recruiters are saying they're using AI to help them write job ads. At this stage, I think that should be 100%. Like the reality is, if I'm looking for any type of position and I go into ChatGPT and I ask it for a job spec, it will give me 90% of what I need. I then give it a few prompts to get it towards 100%. I spend 5 or 10 minutes putting it into the language I like, making sure that it fits my company. And I probably have a really strong job spec in 15 or 20 minutes, where it could have taken an hour and a half, 2 hours previously. There's the other thing that I would encourage everyone on this call to do, and I'm encouraging employers to do all the time, is look at every provider you have. So if you have an applicant tracking system, get in touch with them and say, what AI tools are you introducing? I guarantee you there's ones already you're not using. And it could be as simple as they've got a new AI tool that can keep an eye on your calendar. And when you flick a button to say you're qualified for an interview, they can just find a spot in your diary and you don't have to pick up the phone, waste time talking to them. You just bring them to interview. So there's loads of ways that AI can make us more efficient. And I think that's really what you want to do. We don't need to go out and spend thousands of pounds and getting loads and loads of different tools in, but look at what you have currently and see what you can adapt to make your life a little bit easier and get recruiters particularly reducing that 10 and a half hours a week way down. And going back again to that 6 weeks hiring cycle, that's too long. It needs to come down. And the only way for that to happen is more efficiency. So again, I'll just go one more time into the chat. Just quickly ask, I'd love to know what everyone's top priority in 2026 will be. Give me a couple of seconds more. Not to worry. Graduate training program, finding skilled candidates, attracting more candidates. Yeah, so I think, it's kind of everything we've spoken about. We know that that you need an increase in skills. We know that you'll need more candidates. I think graduate training programs is really interesting idea, again, showing that upskilling. But as we move ahead into 2026, as I said, I've talked about how we need to be more efficient, and we've talked about pay flexibility. But going back to Richard, maybe to get his opinion again on what does he see happening in 2026.
Well, I suppose I expect to see kind of further kind of slowdown in terms of the labour market, in terms of a bit of a rise in unemployment. I think one of the challenges what we've got between now and 2026 is then what is Rachel Reeves then going to do? There's been so much uncertainty. It's every day we're hearing some other tax that she's looking at, and we've still got things like the employer national insurance contributions, that hike. I wouldn't be surprised whether that is actually reversed. Rachel Reeves is the queen of U-turns, and whether she does do a U-turn or at least partial on that with a view to doing changes on national insurance contribution but increasing income tax. But it's also going to be the whole themes of AI, using technology. You're still going to have inflation will come down, but it's still employees are struggling with housing costs, even the likes of the rental sector, particularly in Belfast. It's now uh, over 1100 and about £1,150 a month is the typical rent. That's up over 50% in the last 5 years, and that's making it less attractive, particularly whenever we were attracting people from overseas into the sort of caring professions and care homes and nurses, etc. Where a few years ago, before the soaring rental costs, coming over here to work was more attractive, and so it is going to be that attracting talent and retaining talent, and you're going to have a kind of people are going to be disgruntled with cost of living and all of that, and that isn't going to change anytime soon, and it's just going to make the kind of war for attracting talent just tough.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We do have a little bit of time if anyone has any questions and they'd like to pop it in the chat for either Richard or myself. We'd be happy to answer them. If we can't answer now, we can certainly come back to you as well. Chat or the Q&A box. I think there was a question earlier on around understanding how many candidates cross the border to work both ways. And did we have any information on that? I don't know if you do, Richard. There it is.
No, nothing to hand, but yeah. But I know then it's even a lot of the companies then, even in terms of whether it's the big four consultancy legal firms and stuff, they're doing a lot of business is booming in the south, and they're gaining from that, and there's a lot of people that are sort of flexing to kind of work in both jurisdictions.
Yeah. Okay, I don't see anything else coming in. So at this stage, I can just thank you all for being with us today. Like I said, we'll be doing this every 6 months. We're this is the first one. Every 6 months, it'll be great to see the updates and see what changes and challenges come in 2026 for Northern Ireland. So your opinion does matter as well. We'd love to get feedback on today, what you would like to see more of, what you'd like to hear more about, because whatever feedback you give us, we will do our best to make it as meaningful for everyone joining the call as possible. So I think we'll be sending that out afterwards, and if you could take the time to fill it in, we'd really appreciate that as well.
Just a question there, Chris,
Oh, we do have a question in the chat. Feel there's an increase in irrelevant candidates are now applying to jobs posted on NIJobs. How can NIJobs attract the right people? Well, I think we're like every other business, constantly evolving. I would hope that we do track the number of applicants, say, that are coming from outside of the UK. That is declining, so that's something that we've been working hard on. We use a lot of AI tools and matching technologies that we get from, we're lucky to have local people working in Belfast with group technology. So it's certainly always a challenge in any market that is outperforming other markets. You tend to see people wanting to come there, and you tend to see extra applications. We work hard to try and filter it out as best we can. We can't do it 100%, but we're always working on it. So we will continue to do that, Sarah, and I'll hopefully have a look at your own account after this and see if there's something more we can do on for you particularly. Okay. Well, listen, thank you again, everybody. And like I said, hopefully we'll see you all the next time, and any feedback would be really greatly welcomed.